ABC Wednesday.
Y'all complain all day. We want books. We want paper towels in the classroom. Bet you want raises too.
I'm still waiting on the paper towels.
Abbott Elementary returns with the new season.
We asked the district for more after-school programs. They gave us $50 for class pets instead.
Critics cheer. Abbott Elementary continues to be one of the funniest and most beloved shows on TV.
What y'all doing out there?
Taking bribes.
Proud of y'all.
Abbott Elementary. Season premiere Wednesday, 9:30, 8:30 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 12, and for this episode, we are going to be doing tips and tricks for beginners. I think this episode is long overdue, given that my podcast is all about the beginning parts of 3D printing. So, yeah, let's get into it. But before we do, I would like to, of course, ask for a 5-star review on this podcast, as well as following, and also, I have a new website. There is a section for the podcast on it, and it's just, the website really just encompasses my business as a whole. So the URL will be down in the description of this episode, and the URL itself is www.3dprintingsquared.com. I would really appreciate it if you would check it out and let me know what you think of it. Also, down in the description, you will find that I'm doing something new for this episode. I have created a Google Forms questionnaire. I have been doing polls and the questions, asking a question for response every video, but I realized that it's really only catering to Spotify. I'm pretty sure, like 95% sure, that Apple listeners and Amazon listeners and Google Podcast listeners, all those people can't answer these polls that I have, so I'm really alienating a large portion of my audience when I do that. And so in the description, you're going to find a link that's going to take you to a questionnaire, and it just has a couple questions for you. First question is, what is your name and where are you from, which is completely optional. You don't have to put anything at all for that. I just wanted to put that in there because I'm curious. And the next question is, did you have any questions for me about 3D printing? I would love to hear any questions that you might have. I would love to answer them. I would love to make a whole episode just answering questions that I get from this forum. So I have high hopes for this question. The next one is, if I came out with t-shirts for 3D Printing Basics, would you be interested in purchasing a shirt? And that is something that I've been thinking about for a little while now, was 3D Printing Basics merch. I'm not too sure if I should or shouldn't go for that. I have t-shirts for my own personal company, but it just kind of hit me like I could do shirts for 3D Printing Basics, whether it just be, the logo on a shirt or a funny quip or joke about beginning 3D printing, like a joke for beginners, like the Ender 3 Army or something like that. And yeah, there's a couple more on there, but that was just to give you a brief. None of them are required. You can answer as many or as few as you want, but it will be down in the description, and I really hope that you guys can take the time to answer that. It would really mean a lot to me and give me a lot of insight for this podcast. Okay, with that being said, let's get into the tips and tricks. So tip number 1 is to figure out what kind of 3D printer you are. So, in my opinion, there's 2 main groups of 3D printers. In one hand, you have the Tinkerer or Voron 3D printer, or on the other hand, you have the Product or Keedy printer. And the reason I'm saying Voron or Keedy printer is because a Voron printer, I believe, goes hand in hand with the Tinkerer, because a Voron is something that you get as a kit. You can't really buy these fully assembled. You get them as a kit and you build it from the ground up. You do everything yourself, completely yourself, and you just build it from the ground up. So that is why I call that the Tinkerer's printer. And the Keedy printer, on the other hand, comes fully assembled right out of the box. You can take it out of the box, plug it in, and immediately get to work on it. Now, me personally, I am definitely a Keedy guy. I prefer printers to be fully assembled. I don't like building printers. I don't like building kits. The only kit that I've ever gotten that I put together was a Prusa i3 kit, and it was one of the worst experiences of my entire life. I spent probably 2 months every day after work. I would come home and try and do a little bit of work on it, but it took me 2 months to build a kit who I'm sure a lot of people would say is not that difficult of a kit to put together. And so that just tells you how bad I am at something like that. And that is why I consider myself a Keedy guy, and I prefer products that are ready to go out of the box. But some people, in fact, a lot of people out there, are tinkerers who like to build kits from the ground up. They like to make mods on their printers. They like to do this, that, and the other to all their printers to cater them specifically to themselves. And there's no right or wrong to being on either side. There's no negative, there's no positive. It's just simply how you feel about 3D printing. And this decision is a big one to make because it directly impacts the printers you will be looking at purchasing. And it can really make or break this industry for you. For example, if you're a Keedy type person like me and you buy a Voron, chances are you won't be into 3D printing for very long because building a Voron is a time-consuming and very difficult process. And if you are not somebody who enjoys the process of building something from the ground up and seeing how everything goes together, it's not going to be a fun process for you. So if you go in as a Keedy person and you buy a Voron, it's just not going to end well. It's just not. You're going to hate every second of it. And chances are you're not going to enjoy using it because it was so difficult to put together. And of course, all the tuning you have to do with a Voron, it's not just building the kit. It's everything that goes into place after that really makes it a tinkerer's dream. And that's why they like it. So that's something, in my opinion, that's one of the first things that you need to figure out for yourself is what kind of 3D printer that you are. Okay, next tip is don't be afraid to ask for help. I think this is a big thing because there is a ton of different industries that look down on assisting others and try to hide their tricks. And me personally, being in the machining industry for as long as I was, that was definitely an industry where the older guys would not share or mentor or do anything to help the younger guys. I got very lucky and I got a guy who wasn't as old as like some of the really old machinists, and he was willing to tell me anything, answer any questions I had, share anything. But he has told me lots and lots of stories of people who come into this industry and they just come into the machining industry and they get stuck because they just can't find any help because nobody's willing to offer them help. But not to worry, because 3D printing is not one of those industries. I have been very blessed and thankful and used a lot of the resources that I'm about to list myself to get help. There are so many different places to look, so let me just list a few. Literally any social media platform, but especially Reddit. On Reddit, there are a million different subreddits that have quite literally any specific thing you're looking for. There's one for Bamboo Labs, there's one for Vorons, there's one for Keedy, there's ones for just about every single brand of printer you find. There's one for Ender 3s. There's one for like Ender 3 mods. There's ones for just mods in general. There's a subreddit for everything in 3D printing. And if you are having an issue with something and you can't figure it out for the life of you, you can ask a question on Reddit and you will get it answered quick. The last time I used Reddit was when I was looking at getting a bigger, more expensive printer, and I couldn't find a lot of reviews for it on the marketplace. And so I went to that specific company's subreddit and asked the people in the Reddit how they felt, and there was a lot of responses. I would say in 24 hours I probably got 5 different responses from different people in there, and that helped me make a decision on whether or not to get that one, and that really helped a lot. And there's been tons of times where I've just looked up on the computer the question that I had, and then I found subreddits that have already had whole conversations about the issue I was having and have answered it for me. So definitely Reddit is probably the best place to go. There's also YouTube and podcasts. Podcasts and YouTube is going to be a little bit harder because it's not like a real-time response thing, but there's still plenty of people out there who are very helpful. There are companies who will respond to your email if you send them a question, and I am among those companies. Just email me. I've been saying it. If you email me a question, I will 100% get back to you, and I will 100% answer your question. I really want to hear what you have to say and what you have to ask. And that's the whole reason I started this podcast, because I wanted to help out beginners who are like me and need help or want to learn more about 3D printing. So please reach out to me if you have a question. The final tip is going to be to keep up maintenance on your printer. It is so important to maintain your printer and make sure it's just like as it was as it came out of the box. That's very important. So you're going to have to make sure you clean and oil the linear rods. You're going to have to check the belt tightness. You're going to have to check wiring connections. And just because a 3D printer is something that can run on its own doesn't mean it won't fall into disrepair if you don't tend to it. Especially now that print speeds are getting faster and faster, if dust builds up on a rod and gets into a bearing, it can solidify and then act like a rock on a rod. It can scratch it up, it can dent it, and any effects on the rod can and will severely affect print quality. Keeping printing tolerances tight on a 3D printer is of the utmost importance, and the way to ensure that you are within tolerance on your prints is by doing regular maintenance. I do maintenance once a month, and it really shows because I had a Prusa i3 MKS that I didn't maintain for months. I didn't do anything to it. I bought it fully assembled, and I would say probably a solid 8 months, I didn't do a single thing to it, and it was trash after that. The linear rods were completely dry and were getting really scratched. The belts were loose. It was just not coming out with a good print, and I honestly couldn't figure out why for a long time. I didn't know what was going on. I thought everything was fine, and then all of a sudden it just stopped printing well. But then I finally figured out, I was like, oh, I haven't touched this thing as far as maintenance goes. And I oiled everything up, and it started running a lot better. I checked belt tightness, I did all that stuff, and it started running way, way better. So it's very, very important that you keep up maintenance on your printers. Okay, that's all the time we have today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with these 3 tips about beginning 3D printing, what I believe is honestly the most important tips that you can receive. Please, if you have a second, I would really appreciate it if you looked in the show notes or description of this podcast and went to the Google form and answered the questions that were on there. It would really give me a lot of insight, and it would severely, severely help me out, and I would really, really appreciate it. Don't forget to follow and rate this podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.